he is from Crete University. He made his PhD thesis in 1995 in Denmark Technical University, and you know that he is one of the authors of the first paper about quantum metamaterials. So today talk also related to chain of squids, and it's very close to our activity. Please.
Thank you. Thank you for coming. And today I'm going to talk about quantum coherence in a qubit chain induced by self-induced transparent electromagnetic pulses. So this work is done in collaboration with John Alivich and George Cheronis in the University of Crete. And let's see an outline of the talk. So first I will go through the concept of the metamaterials very briefly and describe historically how they evolved, and especially about nonlinear superconducting quantum, and then I will say a few things about squids and squid metamaterials that some of these things you probably know, and but I have put some few slides, about our recent activity on this. So maybe they are of interest. And then I will talk about the main...
I'm sorry, could you speak in the microphone, please?
Okay. Then I will speak about the main theme of this talk, which is the superconducting quantum metamaterials. And in particular, I will describe the model, which is a charged cubic transmission line. And I will explain the theoretical approaches that lead to some analytical solutions, and also the numerics, which confirm in some cases the results. And okay, I will finish with the concluding remarks. And so the whole concept of metamaterials have started actually based on a very, very old paper by Victor Veselaco, who is here, and that was around 1967. And Veselaco investigated the properties and the consequences into the Maxwell's equations if we use simultaneously negative permittivity and permeability, epsilon and nu. So he found some very interesting results. And actually what he has found is that the refraction index of such a substance which has simultaneously negative epsilon and nu is negative. So that concept provides access to researchers to all four quadrants in the epsilon and nu space. So here in the fourth quadrant we can have wave propagation and among other interesting properties. So in general, today metamaterial is some artificial structure which has been designed to provide unusual or unexpected properties. And but it was not until about the year 2000 since the first metamaterial, let's say, was realized and by the group of Smith, who actually followed the suggestions, the proposals by John Pendry to construct such an artificial structure. So this thing, which you can see here, is in the millimeter scale. They are wires and rings. So Pendry proposed the use of two subsystems in order to obtain simultaneously negative epsilon and nu. So the one subsystem is the system of the metallic wires, which provides negative epsilon, and then the other system is the system of rings, which provides the negative mu. So these rings are called split ring resonators, and they are just metallic rings with a slit. So this is the first one, and it was found that there was a negative index around that frequency, which is about 5 gigahertz, and where the transmission goes down in this interval. So the consequences of a negative refraction index, of course, are very important because we may have inversion of Snell's law, reverse Cherenkov radiation cone, negative radiation pressure, etc. So there was a promise for many applications, some of them quite futuristic, like cloaking devices, super lensing, and also more compact antennas and switches and things like that. So after several years, the metamaterials became nonlinear by the insertion of nonlinear electronic components into the slits of the split ring resonators. So the slit, the little slit here, and there was also one here, it was filled, or better, a varactor diode was mounted in the slit to make the ring non-linear. So, so this type of metamaterial that you see here is like the first one I showed you, except that its elements are now non-linear resonators, and this non-linearity is transferred to the properties of the metamaterial as a whole. So this particular metamaterial is dynamically tunable by varying the input power. So tunability is always a desired property to have in some device, and if it's going to be used in some application. And so after either linear or non-linear metamaterials, like those I described before, suffer from very high losses. And this is, of course, expectable because they operate around the resonance, and at that region of resonance, the imaginary parts of either epsilon or mu, or both, is quite high. So they suffer from high losses. So, and this is the main reason they have not been used very much to applications until now. And so, as a way to reduce losses, some researchers thought to use, instead of metallic rings, to replace the metallic rings by superconducting ones, and then to make this type of metamaterials, with the superconducting rings, either with a made of high density superconductors, either made of a low density superconductor. This is niobium and this is YBCO. And these metamaterials now are intrinsically nonlinear because of the sensitivity of the superconducting state to external fields. But as you can see, the tunability is not very broadband. So the frequency here, for example, with a DC field changes very little, a small percentage, and also with this, in this, okay, this is for a primary resonance shown here, and this is for the other resonance which is shown here. And of course they are also tunable with the temperature, although the response is not so fast. And after all that, then came the squid metamaterials, where the rings, either superconducting or metallic, were somehow replaced by squids. So this is the simplest. I mean, these are typical arrays made by the group of Ustinov, Alexei Ustinov and his collaborators, or Stephen Lage and his collaborators. And this is a type of quasi-two-dimensional. There are just two rows of squids, and this is a real two-dimensional sample of a squid metamaterial, and here it is enlarged a single squid. So the squid metamaterials, we can say this is the direct superconducting analog of the nonlinear metamaterials made from metals. But in this case, the nonlinearity comes from the Josephson effect, because there is in each squid there is a small Josephson junction somewhere here, which is known to be very strongly nonlinear. So it provides a very strong nonlinearity provides a very strong nonlinearity to this device. Okay, it provides a very strong nonlinearity to this device and the metamaterial as a whole. So, the experimentalists have found a number of interesting properties, like, for example, here the tunability, very broadband tunability of the resonance with the DC field. What we see in these pictures is actually almost always the magnitude of the complex transmission. So this feature here means that the transmission is very low, so this is the region of resonance. So by changing the external flux bias, we get the resonance. The resonance may change over a very large percentage of the resonance frequency. So from this data, the permeability can be calculated and can be seen that it can be negative in some frequency region. And also, here for the two-dimensional squid metamaterial, we see that we have also a tunability with the temperature, and here we have the effect of dynamic multistability with input power, and here is another effect which is called broadband transparency. So that means that in some interval of flux amplitudes of the external AC field, the material is transparent, it doesn't absorb any energy. So all these effects have been observed. These are experimental pictures, and there are also other effects which have not been observed until now, but they are, I think, very close to be observed. So all these nice properties exhibited by the squid metamaterials actually come from the properties of single squids. So a single squid is a miraculous device, I think, and it's a nonlinear resonator, strongly nonlinear because of the sine term, which comes from the Josephson supercurrent. So it is the peculiar properties of the squid that gives these interesting properties to the squid metamaterials. There are also, of course, other properties which do not come from well, in a sense they come from the properties of a single squid, but they result as a collective effect of the squid metamaterial. So here, for example, we see the multistability for a single squid. So usually this multistability is not due to the number of minima of the potential of the squid, since in this case we consider non-hysteretic squids, but it is actually dynamic. So if the squid is driven strongly, then the nonlinear effects become very strong, and the squid has a very peculiar behavior, and which can be even chaotic, as it has been shown many years ago. So, for example, let us see here the resonance curve, the amplitude frequency curve for a single squid. In this case, we are in the almost linear regime, so the curve looks like that of a harmonic oscillator. Not quite, but it's close to. So if we increase the amplitude of the AC field, then we may get this hysteretic curve, which shows that there are two simultaneously stable states for the squid, plus one in the middle which is unstable and cannot be observed experimentally, for example. So this is the usual picture that we we have, and it has been actually seen. But if we increase further the amplitude of the AC field, then we get into the strongly nonlinear regime, and then the appearance of more states which are simultaneously stable is possible. For example, you see here, besides the two branches, this one and this one, we have at least three other branches which seem to correspond to some stable squid state. So these states are actually at quite high energies, and the current is well above the critical current, so the junction is in the junction is in the normal state. And if we also include the unstable states that may exist in this situation, you will get something like that. So this is a resonance curve of a strongly driven squid, which shows many simultaneously stable states plus the unstable states which can be seen here. So this snaking curve becomes, so this snake that, this curve looks like a snake. So the snake becomes bigger as the nonlinear effects become stronger, as it seems. So that has the effect that in a frequency close to the resonance frequency, we have many stable states, and the squid can be in any of them, okay, depending also on the initial conditions. So this is very important because when we put together a large number of squids, we have a huge number of possible states for the whole system. So I should also tell you that the modeling of the single squid is done by this simple equation presented here in normalized form. So this phi is the dynamic variable in this case, which is the flux threading the squid ring, and this term corresponds to losses, mainly ohmic losses, but also from the substrate and other factors. And this comes from the Josephson current and the Josephson junction. So there's a coefficient beta, which is called squid parameter, and is very important. And on the right-hand side, we have the applied fields. So we may have a DC flux bias along with the AC field to drive the squid. So all these nice properties that I shown before can be reproduced by a relatively simple model, which is given here. So it's actually the single squid equations which are coupled through magnetic forces. So the squids are coupled magnetically, and this interaction falls off actually as the inverse cube of the distance between their centers. So approximately, of course, because this is not an exact result. So this is basically the modeling for the squid metamaterials. And in the case where the coupling between neighboring squids is very low, we can neglect the non-local coupling and take into account only the first neighbors. So we obtain this approximate equation here, where each squid is coupled only to its nearest neighbors. Here, each squid is coupled to all the others, and this is also numerically difficult because it increases very much the CPU time we need to run a particular program, for example. So some properties that have not been confirmed conclusively from the experiments is the existence, for example, of localized solutions, although there are some indications in recent experiments. Localized solutions which oscillate with the driving frequency, and they are usually called discrete breathers, discrete dissipative breathers. And there are many types of them. For example, this one, we have here an array of squids and the current, the current oscillations. So we are monitoring the temporal evolution for each side. So you see the current in how it evolves in each squid. So we notice that in this point, the current oscillation is different than the other ones. And it's better, it can be better seen here, where the current oscillation in this point close to the middle of the array is very high, while the oscillations of the other squids are very low. So this is a kind of a localized solution which appears generically in nonlinear and discrete systems. So we should also here note that the high amplitude oscillator is out of phase with the low amplitude oscillator. So this is also of importance because it seems that this type of excitation, a discrete breather, changes locally the magnetic response of the system. So the magnetic response at this region around the center is different than the background. So another let's say property of squid metamaterials is the existence of a particular type of rather strange dynamical states, which are called chimera states. So you can see chimera is something that comes from Greek mythology. Is this little animal here, and it means that because these states are something which is composed from different things. So anyway, in order to obtain such kind of states, we need to impose particular initial conditions, or in the case of the squid metamaterial, to excite some of the squids or part of the array to some high energy state, for example. So what we typically may get in this, if we do this initialization properly, is a pattern like this, where we can see here some strong oscillations and here almost nothing. Of course, this is because the low amplitude oscillations here cannot be seen in this scale. But if we enlarge these two regions close to the ends, we see that in this case the oscillators are, okay, of course they are low amplitude, but they oscillate in synchrony. So they obtain the maximum and minimum at the same time. So we have a completely synchronized solution in this region of the array. However, if we enlarge the other region here of the high amplitude oscillations, we see a different pattern. We see that both the amplitudes of the oscillations and also the phases are different in each squid. So this part of the array forms a cluster of squids which are desynchronized. So we have the coexistence of synchronized and desynchronized clusters, and that makes what it is called in the literature a chimera state. So this is, yeah. And this is of course not the only possibility. I mean, this is of course, okay, somehow extreme type of state, but one may also find a different type of state which is also non-uniform, but there is no irregular cluster in this, but it can be formed by two or more different clusters in which the oscillators have different amplitudes. And also the oscillators, they will have different phase difference with respect to the applied field. So in this pattern here, if we enlarge three regions, we see, for example, the high amplitude oscillations. We see here, they look almost synchronized. So they are not irregular like in the previous slide I showed you before. In here, the low amplitude oscillations oscillators are completely synchronized. And here in the middle, there is also another type of behavior where you can see localized localization, like the dissipative breathers I showed in the previous slides. So this is also a highly non-uniform state, and it is usually called clustered state, because the dynamics within a cluster is actually synchronous, but the clusters are not synchronized with each other. So it's, again, non-synchronized solution. So so all these effects, I showed previously the chimera states and cluster states were obtained with a non-local coupling between the squids, which falls off as the inverse cube of the distance between their centers. But it is actually possible to get similar results without considering the non-local coupling, but even in the local coupling case. So, of course, the real system is non-locally coupled, but the local coupling is a useful approximation for the numerics. And it's also of great interest in the nonlinear dynamic systems theory, because it is thought, I mean, there is a general consensus that chimera states appear only if the oscillators are coupled together non-locally. So here we are working on this model to find this type of states, chimera states, but under nearest neighbor coupling, which is local. So here we also plot a particular quantity which is called synchronization parameter, and I should have written it here, but it's, I'm sorry for that. So this synchronization parameter is between 0 and 1, and the 1 means that the state is completely synchronized, 0 is completely desynchronized. So if we are looking for a chimera states or in general non-uniform states, we are looking for values of synchronization parameter which are around 0.5, somewhere in the middle, 0.5 or 0.6, 0.7. So here we have done some simulations to calculate the synchronization parameter as a function of the external flux bias and the frequency. So this case is actually, all these three cases are actually relatively strongly driven squid metamaterials. And these three differ in the coupling between neighboring squids. So this is low coupling, moderate, and rather strong coupling. By strong coupling, we mean that the coupling is 0.05. So it's slightly larger than that estimated in the literature for this type of metamaterials. Although this is also an open question, I think. And anyway, here we see something interesting. I mean, and this is, it's more visible here, that the synchronization parameter may take values very close to 0 in particular regions of this plane. So around here, for example, the very bright regions indicate a state which is with very low synchronization. So the squids are practically desynchronized. So here, for example, if we choose a particular flux bias, here around 0.25 in units of flux quantum, we see as a function of a frequency how the value of the synchronization parameter changes. So at low frequencies, it's practically 1. And at some point, starts to decrease, and then goes down until it gets a very low value, and then goes up again. So this line here corresponds to the synchronization parameter when we pick up the phases of the squids actually randomly, completely randomly. So, and this is a finite number, not zero, because the system is finite. So we cannot expect somehow a phase transition from synchronized to desynchronized state where the desynchronized state will get to zero. We'll get a zero synchronization parameter, and that's because the system is finite. Of course, the bigger the system, the closer this value will go to zero. So we are looking, for this type of, also for this type of synchronization, desynchronization transitions in these systems. And, well, which are also of interest. Okay, and then the last slide about the squid. Here is again the multi-stability resonance curve, or the snaking resonance curve as we call it. And here is the enlargement very close to the resonance frequency. Of course, as I said, the squid is quite strongly driven, so the resonance frequency is actually the geometrical frequency. So because of the strong driving, the resonance frequency of the squid has moved from the squid resonance frequency to the geometrical frequency, which is about 1 in normalized units. So here we see the enlargement around the resonance frequency, and all these lines correspond to states. Some of them are stable and some are stable. So what will happen if somehow couple together two squids? So if we couple two squids together, this pattern in the inset of this figure becomes like this, for a very reasonable coupling between squids. So we see that the combined system of two squids shows a very large number of states that it can occupy. So as a consequence, if we put many squids in the metamaterial, the total number of states available for this metamaterial will be really huge. So if, for example, we have n squids, then the available states for the system will be much more than 2 to the n power. So this effect was described as attractor crowding in some older works, and this is the way, and this is why we get these chimera states in squid metamaterials. So if we excite some of the squids or part of the array to some high energy, then they will find some of these high energy available states which are very crowded to occupy them. And then even the slightest perturbation may shift, the system from one state to the other, and it looks as seemingly random dynamics, while this is probably due to the very large number of available attractors for this system. And here we have also chaotic attractors, as you can see, and not only one, but 2 or 3 at least. So these chimera states, which are obtained now with a local coupling, nearest neighbor coupling, if we want to follow them in time, it's better to present them as a map of the phase. Well, actually here is the derivative of the phase with respect to time, and so this is the side number, and this is time. So the uniform colorization means that the squids in this region are synchronous, while in the center they are desynchronized. So usually we measure this synchronization parameter, which has this form in these two cases shown here, and there is a characteristic, there is a feature of this, and that is the fluctuations. So these chimera states give synchronization parameters with several fluctuations, and the distribution of these fluctuations is a measure of the metastability of this state. So these states are believed to be metastable. However, we can follow them for very, very long time, and they still remain, I mean, they seem to survive for very, very long time. Okay. So now, I think it's time to go to the real quantum metamaterial. So, as you know, the only quantum metamaterial until now is the one constructed and tested by the Alexei Ustinov and his collaborators, and it is actually consists of 20 superconducting quantum resonators, but there are several proposals on quantum metamaterials which also use superconductors, and we are working on a model for a superconducting quantum metamaterial which consists of a superconducting transmission line which is loaded periodically with charged qubits. So these charged qubits are actually between, each of them, each charged qubit is between two Josephson junctions. So it's actually, the charged qubit is a little superconducting island between two Josephson junctions in this configuration. Here you also see a pulse, the envelope of the pulse, electromagnetic pulse, which is out of scale, because in what follows we will assume that the extent of the pulse is much larger than the size of the unit cell here. So this is a side view of this configuration, in which we can also see the orientations of the applied field. So the vector potential is perpendicular to this, and the superconducting electrodes are separated by a distance d. Okay, so as I said, the wavelength of the electromagnetic radiation should be much larger than the size of the unit cell of this structure in order to treat analytically this model. And then we can write down the total energy of the system, which we are going to quantize later. So the total energy has a very simple form, and it consists of three, let's say, it's separated in three terms, included in the three brackets. So the first one is the energy of the qubits system. The second is the energy of the electromagnetic field as a function of the normalized vector potential. And the third is the interaction between them. So we don't, in this model at least, we do not consider interaction between the qubits. So the qubits do not interact directly, but they interact indirectly through the vector potential of the electromagnetic field. So the relevant variables here are this phi n, which is the phase at the nth charged qubit, and of course the vector potential at each qubit. So these are the relevant variables which we are using in the following to first quantize the system and then try to find the solutions. So quantization of the qubit subsystem provides this Hamiltonian. So we should note that here we still keep the electromagnetic vector potential as a classical quantity. So this approach is actually semi-classical, we would say. So we have here the operators that excite a charged qubit from the ground to the first excited state, or de-excited from the excited state to the ground state. And a major simplification is, of course, here that we consider the qubits to be two-level systems. Okay, this is, of course, the usual approximation. So these P and P prime get only two values here, and this is why we have only two energies, the energy of the ground state and the energy of the excited state. This symbol here, VPP prime, denotes the matrix elements of the interaction and can be calculated. And generally, the squeeze, the charge qubits are in a superposition state, which we write here, which can be introduced into the Schrödinger equation with this Hamiltonian in order to get something different. So at the same time, we introduce also the Bloch variables in quite standard way. So we can reduce the problem into we can formulate the problem into the Maxwell-Bloch equations, which are coupled to an equation for the discretized electromagnetic vector potential. So this equation, you may notice that it's like very much like a discrete sine-Gordon equation, which is, however, driven parametrically by the Bloch components of the qubits. So these are actually the equations that we shall use in the numerics. So we keep they have been obtained under a minimum set of approximations, because in order to get analytical solutions, we'll make many more approximations, and then we'll see what we'll get. Okay, the main approximations we are doing is, first of all, the linearization of the sine term. So we consider weak fields, so we can replace sine an by an. Then we take the continuum limit in both the vector potential and the Bloch variables. And then we are using the ansatz, these ansatz, and the slowly varying envelope approximation, where this epsilon and phi are amplitude and phases are slowly varying amplitude and phases. So this relation relates the wave vector with the frequency, and then we need to transform again the Bloch variables, and the important thing is to enforce the two-photon resonance condition. So actually the equations we get after all these simplifications are similar to two-photon self-induced transparency, not just one photon. So after all these simplifications and some calculations that we have to do, we obtain two equations for the slowly varying amplitude and slowly varying phase. And after one more transformation, we get the equations for the new Bloch variables, and we get also these two expressed in the new variables. So the latter system, which of course there are many calculations, in this from going from one to another set of equations, but they are not they are tedious but quite standard. So the latter system, the S Bloch parameters and the S Bloch variables and the equations for epsilon and phi can be eventually integrated to get a Lorentzian pulse for the amplitude and a Lorentzian also for the RZ Bloch variable, which is called population inversion. So the main point here is that we get for the pulse, for the propagating pulse, we obtain a Lorentzian envelope. a Lorentzian amplitude, which provides the envelope of the pulse. So self-induced transparent pulses may propagate in this metamaterial we considered with the charged qubits in the superconducting transmission line. But the most important, I think, is that this pulse induces a population inversion pulse in the qubit chain itself. So this is solely due to the electromagnetic pulse which propagates with a self-induced transparent way in the metamaterial. So from this relation here, where sigma and kappa are defined somewhere in this line, so we can obtain the velocity amplitude relation for this metamaterial. So what is important in this case? Here we also see the envelope of the propagating pulse and also the induced population inversion pulse in two cases, in the case of absorbing media and amplifying media. So in order to discriminate between the two, the absorbing media are actually those that initially all the qubits are in the ground state. Where in amplifying media, all the qubits are in the excited state. So you see, the electromagnetic pulse locally excites the qubits. And as it passes, the qubits go back again to the ground state. And while the pulse excites the qubits in front of them. So one important detail, let's say, about this is that the velocity of propagation is a function of the qubit parameters. So somehow the velocity of the propagating pulse and the induced pulse can be engineered to attain some desired value. So you see here, for example, for two different values of this ratio, the limiting velocity in the metamaterial, shown as a black line, it's much lower here than here, as compared with the purple line, which is the limiting velocity for ordinary media. So somehow the limiting velocity can be engineered through the qubit parameters. So let's see if all these theories confirmed by the numerical results. Here we see some snapshots of both the population inversion pulses and the electromagnetic vector potential pulses. Both pulses travel to the right with the same velocity. Well, not for all time interval, but... And the analytical solutions are also shown as red curves or red pulses. So you see here. So what we see, here we start, for absorbing media, we start with all the qubits in the ground state. And for the electromagnetic pulse, we put the analytically predicted form. So we want to see if actually this pulse will excite the qubits or not. So if we initialize, as I just said, and then leave the system to evolve, then we see that indeed the pulse, the electromagnetic pulse, may excite the population inversion pulse. Here you see this is at zero time, all the qubits in the ground state, and here a pulse appears which travels to the right, and its amplitude grows to go to almost +1. So here you see that actually it's traveling a little faster than expected from the analytical results, but still it's close to the analytical result. But after some time, the pulse loses its coherence, and then it becomes broader and broader, and it slows down until eventually stops. And these are some profiles of the pulses. You see, they don't look very nice, but they are still pulses that propagate. Okay. So similar results. Okay. Here is some similar results for different parameter sets, and here, for example, we compare the case without defacing with that with a little defacing. So it's not, I mean, there is not much difference. So such a small defacing doesn't do very much. But if we increase the defacing, then we see that the pulse cannot be, the amplitude of the pulse does not ever become close to 1, but it's actually much less than 1, and also it loses its coherence quite fast compared to the case without defacing. On the other hand, the electromagnetic pulse does not affected by this defacing thing, which is mainly affects the qubits. Okay, and this is now the case where we considered amplifying media, which means that all the qubits are initially in the excited state. So in this case, it doesn't work exactly as predicted analytically, where we should expect a pulse like this, for example, the green one, to travel along with electromagnetic pulse, but instead of that, we get something a little different. In this case, we see that we have a propagation of something that looks like a kink. It propagates, it's much slower than the analytical prediction of the pulse, of course. And also, here the electromagnetic pulse is also much slower than the analytically predicted pulse. And here, for another set of parameters, the situation is even more complicated. Here we see some pulses traveling. One of them goes quite close with analytical prediction, but we have another pulse coming from behind, and then we have a region where which is quite irregular. And so this is a matter of future work to analyze all these effects and perhaps to refine this model, because, as I said in the beginning, the qubits are not coupled together, and this may cause problems in sustaining such type of pulses. So I think I'll stop at this point, but I have some little movies that to show, and about these pulses, and I think movies are always okay. So let me okay. So we start with the we see here we see the electromagnetic pulse, and here is the population inversion pulse. So we start with an electromagnetic pulse like this, the same as the analytical form, and this at 0. And we see how the pulse will be excited and evolve eventually. So in the beginning there are some fluctuations, and at some point the pulse seems to be formed, and for some particular time interval it will be very close to 1, which means that we have a complete inversion if it's close to 1. But of course then after some time it loses the coherence, and decays. So this is the good part now, because it's close to 1. And we can also see in the other how the electromagnetic pulse evolves. After that it decays and it becomes a very low amplitude. And you also see that there are some little pulses left behind which do not propagate and are fixed at particular qubits. So this also needs further research to be. Okay, and another movie is about the chimera state that I was talking before. So this is a two-dimensional array of squids. Well, this is 64 by 64, it's pretty big. And we have excited this middle square. We have excited this middle square. So we have given a large amount of flux to the squids in there, so they can go to some high energy state and stay there. So after that, we started degrading the system, solving the equations. So the state of the total system, now it's like a chimera state. So we have the outer part, in which the squids are synchronized and they execute very low amplitude oscillations of the flux. You see here this moves from slightly below 0 to slightly above 0. That's why the color changes also. And we have the middle squared where the dynamics completely desynchronized. And of course, the amplitude is rather high. So this is a typical, we would say, chimera pattern or something. So we have two groups of squids with very different dynamics. Okay, I think. Very nice. Sorry.
Excuse me. Does change of color show the state of density?
Sorry?
Here. Does change of color show the state of density? Here, in squids, the chimera.
Yeah, what did you say?
My question is the change in color show the density of state.
The change in the color shows changes with the value of the value. I mean, there is a, for example, if the amplitude becomes, I mean, as this is the maximum moves, changes color. There is a, I should have a color bar, but it's, also I would like to say that the quantity that we see to fluctuate is the flux through the squids, because I didn't write this here. So this, okay. So I think I will stop at this point. I want to thank you for listening.
Please, questions?
What types of pulses did you propagate from the quantum?
In this, mainly...
In terms of, is it pi pulse, 2 pi pulse?
Yes, it's, there are 2 pi pulses, yes.
2 pi pulses.
These, mainly Lorentzians like this. Okay. But we are planning to try different, more like soliton type pulses. Because the Lorentzians, you know, they have a, they don't decay very fast. And And it's a little problem also in the numerics. And I mean, we don't need to do this this approximation for the sign. Perhaps we don't need to do this approximation, but anyway. But okay. Did I answer?
Actually, I have another question after
Yeah.
that. For an experimentalist, what would you advise? What if we have such a material? What would you advise? Which pulses should we actually apply to these systems to demonstrate something nice?
Yeah.
Because, well, you understand, we want to show a nice figure as well and demonstrate that it actually works as we predict. So from these movies, I would say, okay, that's the prediction, but it's not really easy to fit them to experimental data.
Yeah,
Is there
of
something
course.
simple which is actually, well, which works?
You mean the simpler pulse or the
Yeah,
pulse
for-
of a different form or something?
Yeah, a pulse that gives, which we know how it transforms at the end of this chain.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure because somehow we are, at least in the numeric, we are forced to follow the analytical results. So, if, of course, I mean, if you don't, I mean, the less approximations you do, the best you approximate the real state of the pulse, and then you may have better results.
Okay.
But I think Lorentzians are
Okay.
could be Lorentzians or could be Cage pulses also.
Could you show your array of Church qubits?
Yeah. Let me see. How?
Yes. Okay. So you have strip line
Yes.
shorted by Church qubits.
Yeah, yeah.
And you can see some gate.
Yeah.
So what parameter can you change? For example,
here.
parameters of gate.
Of course you can change the parameters of the gate. Although we don't use this in this work, we don't use the gate. They are all without. We don't apply anything.
Passive line.
Yeah.
And what is parameter of the Johnson junction? No, ratio of
Okay. Yeah.
Johnson and Church energy. What is the limit?
This works for typical values of. I didn't written them down, but it's more or less typical values for Johnson junctions. For example, okay. And also there are geometrical parameters also play a role. The junction parameters, for example, the separation of the electrodes goes into the coupling parameter here. So, and also the junction parameters, one can change and play with these parameters.
Okay, but when you calculate what value of the parameters you use.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, I don't have them now.
To feel limit of the change. This ultra charge limit, and we have some charge soliton, or to feel what is the wave you have along this strip line. Because if you have some real distributed Josephson junction, you have certainly propagation of Johnson waters.
Yeah.
In your case, you have some propagation of charge, yes? Practically, or not? What is the wave?
No. Sorry, yeah, I didn't. The pulse that is induced is in the population inversion. That is, the qubit from the ground state goes to the. So the pulse goes from.
So it's charge wave.
Yes.
Clear? Another questions? Yes.
As I saw, you're talking about approximately thousands of qubit in the line.
Yeah.
But and it
Actually,
seems-
they're. Yeah, sorry.
it seems they must have equal parameters. Each qubit should be
Yes, but we are going to
adjusted.
investigate now the case of disorder, as the next step.
Okay.
Actually, yeah, we need such big arrays. Actually, there are a few thousand. I showed only part of this because of the shape, of the Lorentzian, because it doesn't decay very fast. That's why we want to look for different type of pulses, as was. So it would be better if they decay faster and
Right, but
it would be more feasible also for experimentals to have a smaller array and see this.
in real life, it is difficult to make such a huge array of tunable qubits.
Yeah. Of
So
course,
can we try some kind of smaller system about tens of qubits to show some signs of such a behavior in experiment?
Yeah, we didn't try yet this one. You see this pulse, the pulse in the movie, it occupies quite
Yes, many qubits.
large number of qubits.
Oh.
This is a different parameter regime that we didn't check yet. This type of excitation would be like the breather type that I showed you, a breather in the quantum metamaterial. So in this case, you may have one or two. It's not one or two qubits excited and all the others in the ground state. But we have to go to the other end of the parameter regime. Because this.
Right. Thank you.
Talking about the coherence, we have mainly encountered two type of coherences. Because we know the function of the coherence is depend upon the cross function, and amplitude coherence and intensity coherence are the mainly part we encounter. So my question is that while exciting the qubits and the splitting of electric field, what kind of coherence do you encounter?
Coherence would mean that we have this nice pulse which can propagate. In theory, it can propagate for a long time. Of course, in the numerics, it cannot. The coherence, I would say, by coherence we mean that the pulse remains close to the analytical solution for some time. This is the time we consider that we have some kind of induced quantum coherence.
I mean to say that electric field splits very fastly, so we cannot measure the amplitude, but rather than that, intensity coherence has its own value. So how do you measure the intensity coherence in cross section? When you excite a qubit by the pulse, and there is electric field which splits very fastly, normally the coherence we detect is by amplitude coherence, or either by intensity coherence. So my question is that when you excite your qubit, how do you encounter intensity coherence? Because amplitude is going very fastly, and we cannot split and we cannot calculate the electric field which is splitting. That's my question is, how do you measure that? Okay.
This is the first step you know to go more
More questions? Thank you very much.
Do you think that I try to keep this pro all the time, but I don't know if I managed to.
That's okay. All is okay. Sorry, can I do a copy?
Yeah, so
Copy for HIF.
For report.
Yeah.
the microphone and the speaker. Once again, I have done this, once again, it was very tough. Because, I turned around to look at the people and the microphone stays on the other side. I was not listening very well what the guy was telling me.
So that there is probably two types of coherence, intensity, and field.
I hear that, but
I want to ask, did you treat both of them, or
no, we didn't.
Все.
Господин Жириновский, вы решаете слово.